All right, this is where we got to. It's still raining because, still the same day. Vacuumed it out, did a pretty good job. Now I've put swarf everywhere from having to drill out rivets, but it is what it is. Um, Hi guys, Future Nate here. Just thought I'd cut in because after editing this video, I realized that it's really boring. It's about planning for the roll cage, and there's a lot of forward thinking involved, and so it's all just kind of talking and pointing. Now, if you are planning a roll cage and you want to know everything that is involved in it, there's probably better videos on YouTube for that. But if you want to know a handful of things, then please do stick around. At least give it a thumbs up and a comment to make me feel better about my horrible life, and come back later because I promise it gets slightly better in the future when we start fabrication. But anyway, back to our schedule program. The next step now, if you were doing this yourself at home, would be to strip the wiring. Presumably at this point your car still runs, and that's very handy for when you're stripping wiring because you want your car to run at the end of it. You don't want to remove something that was required. So that would be my next suggestion to you. Now, I've touched on this before. I'll sort of run over it again, especially if you're not like a wiring guru. This sort of thing is extremely intimidating. However, it really doesn't need to be. It just looks untidy. If it was bundled up like that, you'd be less intimidated. It's because I've stripped everything out. However, things like this big plug here, this one goes to the old airbag module, and the whole lot can go. That's the light for the ashtray. You know, you don't need that. So every car obviously is different. However, in the 206, all these green yellow wires are earth, and basically anything orange is airbag and can all go. Word of warning though, just because a plug isn't plugged into something and the car still runs, don't assume that you can just get rid of all of this, because sometimes, and Peugeot do it a lot, in somewhere in the harness, like even back here, these two of these wires can be looped around, but I don't know what reason, or they can be spliced into each other, and this connection needs to happen. However, that wire up there does nothing. So it is a thing, and sometimes even in the plug for safety systems, there can be resistors, and the ECU needs to see that resistance to run. I can assure you in the 206 there are none of those, but in other cars I have come across that. So removing, saying, this doesn't go anywhere, I can get rid of all these wires, not always true. So I recommend not cutting wires. That can create a huge hassle. Just get a cheap D-pin set and D-pin the plugs. Do it in batches. So, grab your plug, something that's a bit more substantial. Grab your plug, take a photo of, like, each of these plugs comes apart. So, you take a photo in the plug, work out where each wire goes to, and then D-pin it, and then check, constantly check. So do a bundle of wires, make sure the car starts, make sure any of the functions that you want to still works. Like you're keeping headlights, if you're keeping wipers, whatever. Check all those systems, make sure they still work, everything fine, great. Bin those wires, move on to the next ones. A lot of things are obvious. So for instance, park brake switches over here. This car doesn't care if the park brake's on or off to start. I don't need it to start the car. It's only activates a light on the dash. So those wires can go. I've got no problems in removing those. Power mirror and power window wires. If you're not retaining those, there's a 99% chance that they can go. Take that hole, strip that hole, loom back, deep in the whole lot, double check. Great. When you start getting into things that you don't know what they do, they're not obvious, there's safety systems, I recommend removing 2, 3, 4 wires at a time and check what happens. If you remove 4 wires and the car suddenly doesn't start, or the windscreen wipers stop working, whatever, put them back in, double check to make sure everything's come back. It should, and then remove them one at a time and work out which wires actually are required. When it's required, tape it up, but do not remove, big letters, and that one stays, carry on. that's my recommendation. Um, I'm not going to do that because I've got an aftermarket ECU and I'm stripping pretty much everything out of this car wiring wise. I'm going to have wires running to the rear for the fuel pump, brake lights, indicators, and that's about it. In the front, I'm going to have headlights, indicator, wiring, windscreen, wiper wiring, just things that I need for my category. I'm also going to have fuel pump fan on a switch in the dash, and obviously power windows because I'm keeping those. Everything else is gone. ECU will go over there. There'll be like a CAN wire to the cluster, and then everything else goes out to the engine. That's essentially it. I'll recycle the wiring that's in the car because why not? It's already individually color coded, and you know, I'm not going to run 50 red wires and then have to try and diagnose it later on when I've got stuff that already works. It's really easy to keep track of. Peugeot actually writes on the wires. Each wire has an individual code written on it. It's very, very hard to read and it often gets smudged. But so you can pull it this wire here, and this one here says, it's all smudged. Uh, 12330424, and I can go somewhere else in the car, find that wire, and go, oh, that's that wire. So I can reuse that wiring, write the code down, and put down where it's going to go. If I was doing something more complex, I probably won't because it's going to be a very basic system, and the Haltech obviously, has its own coding system. But that's my plan. So I'm going to leave the wiring in. The other benefit to stripping it first is when you start doing cage things, you've got less to have to deal with, and you can sort of run your wiring where you ideally would like it, and then just have to move it around feet or whatever. Uh, yeah. So my next step, which would be your next step after uh, stripping the wiring, mount the seat. Before you start doing anything roll cage, before you start doing anything, mount the seat, because these things are huge these days. Modern seats are gigantic. Like it doesn't look at here. When you put this in the car, it takes up so much space. If you're putting two in, you'll find that like there's not a lot of room in the car to take full containment seats. So this is the biggest thing you're putting in the car. Put the biggest thing in first. Plus, you really want to design your cage around your seating position. So you want your main hoop to be as so this is kind of confusing. You want it to be as close to your helmet as possible, but at the same time as far away from your helmet as possible, if that makes sense. So I'll explain it more when we start, fitting and measuring. But so we're going to get the seat in. I'm limited by my steering column, which is reason that we had to get rid of the last shell. So keep that in mind. If you're in an unlimited class and you can put your seat wherever, move it to where it's ideal for racing. So low as possible, close to the center as possible. If you've got corner scales, corner balance your car, hop in it, move yourself around within reason, obviously. Like you're pretty much the heaviest part in the car now that you've stripped it, and I mean that in a rude way, but like there's not much left in these things now that's like more than 80 kilo or whatever you weigh, apart from the engine. So you moving around in the car can help with corner balance. So if you can, move yourself back, move your pedals back, move your steering column back, and improve your 50-50 weight balance, go for it. I obviously don't have that option. I'm limited by my steering column. I can move my pedals. I can actually put a pedal box in. I'm probably not going to, but I am going to push that clutch over a little bit because, as you can see, they're very, very close together. All right. Through dash bar, steering column back in. I took the multifunction unit off, put the steering wheel on. That's pretty much where the steering wheel is going to live. So I've thrown the seat in. I already had it pretty well set up from the previous vehicle, so I kind of it actually fell right into place. So it's sitting on a brick and a lump of timber at the moment. I'll tell you around the other side where you can see better. So in the other shell, I actually pretty well utilized the factory bolt holes, which are there and there for the seat. I just took those studs off. That's where the seat sat. Sitting at the moment, I'm actually really happy with the position. It's great. Steering wheel's pretty well centered. Pedals are on the right distance back. I think what happened was I had to move it forward from that position once I put the diagonal in. So now back to what I was saying before. If I didn't edit out my spiel because it was quite lengthy. So now helmet wise, it sits in this area here, so sort of just off the back of the seat, and it's kind of where you want your maximum strength. So currently the maximum strength of the shell is in the pillar, so in here and around here, a little bit through the middle, a little bit through the back, but really it's just this structure through here is the crash structure of the car. So may as well utilize what's already there, and we'll just double it up. So I'll try and keep my main hoop tied into this, and just for extra strength. You don't want to bring your main hoop bar back too far. Like, it's probably easier to put it in here. If you can see inside there, there's a ridge runs along here. So I could sit the main hoop on that and run it back there. However, it gives too much opportunity for this pillar here to collapse in on me. And I don't want that. So I want to move the bar pretty much directly over the back of the seat. You don't want it like right over, because then you've got extra padding and that. If you do happen to slip in the harness, you can smack your head on it. Smacking your head on a bit of tin as opposed to a strong piece of roll cage, totally different thing. So get it out of the way of the seat, sit it up here. Main hoop can lean back or forward by a tiny little bit. I think it's 10 degrees, which is quite a bit. However, I like mine nice and vertical. And it doesn't really state in the rules anymore. It used to say that the legs had to be parallel. I think it says they have to be as close to parallel as practical. So basically the bottom legs straight up and down, it's the strongest. Straight up and down is the strongest. If they're leaning in, that's like a weak point. So when you're calculating your main hoop, try and keep your legs straight up and down, which means that the total of your 4 bends is 180 degrees. So maximum 4 bends. So you bend in the top corner, do not bend in the middle of the roof, and then you're allowed to bend in the lower part of the legs, what the rules state. So rules are easily downloadable, whether you go FIA, Motorsport Australia, ANDRA, any other governing body. The rules for roll cages are easily downloadable. Read through them many times, because you will misinterpret things, forget things, etc., etc. So read through them. Always go a bit above. Anything that you don't quite understand or is open to interpretation, double check. There's always people you can ring or email or whatever. The last thing you want to do is build a non-compliant roll cage, because they are a bitch to modify. They really are. So like, for instance, my first cage, I came to this nice flat part of the boot. There's actually, you can see there's like spot welds all the way along here. There's like a little reinforcing bar under here, and that is the back pickup point for the rear subframe. So this is basically the strongest part of the boot floor. So I plated this up, ran my cage back to here. However, a roll cage structure has to be within the center lines of the axle. The vehicle's center line of the axle of this vehicle is about here. So I was about 60 mil back past that. Now, I could get an exception for it. Basically, I just had to plead my case, and they will approve it. However, any different scrutiny any minor change in rules, etc., all of a sudden that's non-compliant. You've got to cut it out and start again. So yeah, don't make mistakes like that. We'll go around this side. So mounting feet is my main concern now. So if you look up here, you can see if I come straight down, I'm going to go basically through my seat almost to there. I can probably just squeeze it in. I might have to lean it back a fraction, and I'll follow that line of the window down. Now, do I go directly to the floor here? Sorry, it's dark. Or do I build a box off here and weld up here? Obviously, if I could plate this in fully, go down the back here along the floor, and then put a top plate over the whole thing, and it'll give me a nice spot to weld to. I can get all the way around. It would be fantastic. It also allows me to move my diagonal brace up a little bit, because that diagonal has to be within 100 mil of the end of the tube. So if I have the end of the tube down here, my diagonal has to come down behind here. Makes it difficult to get a weld. So making a box, definitely beneficial, because then my diagonal tube can be up here, up a bit higher. Drawback to that, I don't know, neatness maybe, maybe, I don't know, fractionally weaker. I honestly don't know. To mount it directly to the floor, you either have to, struggle, or take the roof off of the car, or cut a hole the same size as the tube down there and drop the cage through, because you have to plan how you're going to weld. And when you get up into the roof, there's a fair bit of welding that happens in the roof line. So your diagonal runs up to over there and can run to over here, and you would like to get in up over the top with a welder. Also, when you're putting your lateral tube in, lateral tube comes in here, it needs to be fully welded all the way around. Now, getting a welder in here, next to impossible. You can either take the roof off, come in from the top, or what most people do is build sill boxes. Don't weld the sill box in, just sit it in, tack it in, whatever. Bend up all your cage, tack it all together, take your sill boxes out, then the cage can drop down. Whatever your sill box is, in this case it'll be like 120 mil, which will bring this junction here down 120 mil, which will bring it down to like right here. I can get a weld on it. That's why most people do it that way. Otherwise, like I said, you've got to cut a hole in the floor and drop the cage down through the floor, then lift it back up. And then when you plate directly to the floor, you put a plate top and bottom. So, options. I think I'm going to go with the sill boxes. There's no reason not to. I really don't want to weld up underneath the car, because I'll show you when we get under there. I've got to remove the fuel tank and some underbody stuff. Old, thin metal covered in seam sealer, paint, underbody sealer, and crap. Doesn't weld at all. It's nasty. It smokes. Horrible, horrible stuff. I would like to avoid it if possible. So, okay, welcome back. You look well rested. Lots happened. Not really. Feels like a lot. So you recall I actually wanted to do the roll cage with the car sitting on the ground, and I tried a bunch of things with different shims under the wheels, adjusting tire pressures, all that kind of thing. And the body just wanted to twist the whole time. So I've had to go with jack stands on dodgy pieces of wood. Obviously, this garage slopes, well, not obviously, but this garage slopes this way because it's on a bit of a hill and it leaks water. So I guess I thought it'd be smart to have the water run out of here. So it's actually quite a decent sized hill. So it's on about 35 mil blocks on this side. Jack stands are sitting on the ground on the other side. I have gone around and around and around the car a bunch with different measuring. I've got a bunch of different measuring tools. The most crucial one is the inclinometer. This thing's very, very accurate, down to like 0.05, sorry, of a percent of a degree. So, of a degree. So, you know, I've just gone around and around and around with this, sitting on different parts of the car. They all sort of vary a little bit. I've had to make a decision between getting the car 100% level and having all of the doors open and closed properly so that the boot lid doesn't want to shut properly. I have a feeling, though, that actually might be the fact that the rear of the car behind the jack stands is sagging down a little bit. Because if you watch this gap, when I slam it, it doesn't actually pull in any way. Like, it doesn't pull side to side. So I think that the latch might move away when the car is jacked up. In saying that, I did have it opening quite nicely, but then the car wasn't level. So same thing, this door, when you open it, doesn't drop significantly, which is not too bad. Oh, just smack the camera with the door. That's great. It's not perfect by any means, so we are sitting on a, it says it's a half a degree, 0.45 degree. That's leaning forward. So if I lift it up at the front, you can see, not too far. But anyway, yeah, so it's a very small fraction leaning forwards on that side. On this side, I mean, this is only as good as these seams are. On this side, we're the same, 0.5, you know, moving it along, it goes, you know, 0.7, 0.1, like it's only as good as it is. Like the center of the car, dead center, should be symmetrical, so you should be able to get a good measurement in the middle there, which that's at, you know, 0.2. Come out here, it goes to 0.45. Go that way a little bit, it goes to 0.65. It, you know, it's not great. Same thing down here, 0.35, come up a little bit, 1. You know, so it's as good as I can get it, because you got to think we're welding this shell rigid. A lot of planning in doing cages. So that is the point where I'm at. There's going to be a lot of cleanup in here. I need to get in here with a bunch of different tools to try and get every scrap of paint, every scrap of seam sealer, everything out of there, because I want half decent welds. That goes for underneath the car as well. I also still need to jump underneath and remove the fuel tank, because I can probably show you this now. Let's jump under the car with all the spider webs. Gimbal hates it. Yeah. So that piece there is the fuel filter. That plastic thing there is the fuel tank. This piece of, that's the heel board right there. So basically we weld down the backside here, along here, and along here. That's the base of our plate. So welding that close to a fuel tank is always a bit dodgy. So that part there is, like you can see, that's the fuel pump right there. That's the fuel tank. So we need to be welding all in here, and the fuel tank's just on the other side of that. Not ideal. Drop that out. I'll do that off camera. That is exceptionally boring. This is already way too much jabbering. I'll bring you back in. I'll show you how to measure a tube.